Hello, I'm Stephen Boylan from Easons.com, and I'm absolutely delighted to welcome Hazel Gaynor. Her new book, The Girl From The Savoy, has just been published by HarperCollins. Hazel, thank you so much for coming in to speak to us.
Thank you very much. I'm delighted to be here on the sofa.
Thank you so much. The Girl From The Savoy is the new book, and it's set in the early 1920s.
Mm-hmm.
The Girl Who Came Home was set kind of Titanic time and in the 1980s, and A Memory of Violet was set in the early 20th century.
Yes.
So when it comes to writing period books, do you pick the period you want to research and write about first, or is it the story that dictates the period that you write in?
Really good question. I think it's been slightly different for each book. So for the first two, certainly for The Girl Who Came Home, it was very much about the Titanic.
Yeah.
So it was that event that drew me to that story. A Memory of Violets was more the era, so that sort of world of Victorian London and the street sellers and the markets and the flower sellers. And for The Girl from the Savoy, again, very much a desire to write a story set in that alluring era of the Roaring Twenties.
Yeah.
So that was where this story started, was a love of the era and wanting to set a story in that where there was so much social change going on. It was just after the Great War.
Yeah.
So with all that flux and social boundaries moving, I just felt it was a great setting for story and drama and emotion.
So tell us about the story of The Girl from the Savoy.
So The Girl from the Savoy is it's really a rags to riches story. It's set in the early 1920s, and it tells the story of an ordinary working girl, Dolly Lane, who starts in a new position as a chambermaid at the Savoy Hotel in London. But Dolly has always wanted more from life. She has dreams and she has hopes well beyond her station. And Dolly responds to an advert she sees in a newspaper from a musical composer who's looking for a muse to help inspire his music. She responds and she finds herself thrown into this world of the West End stage and musical and chorus girls that she's always looked at from a distance. And The Girl from the Savoy really follows Dolly's story as she follows that dream. Somebody recently actually described it as a Downton Abbey meets Cabaret, which I think is a really great
it's a
way
pretty
of
good combination.
Works for me. So it's really her story, but with an actress, Loretta May, who's the other protagonist as well.
And how much time does it take you to go in and research? And I mean, it must be a lot of fun to go back and look at old documents and all that kind of thing.
Trials, cocktails from the era. It's very serious.
Hard life.
Terrible. I had to take that research very seriously. My research really is hugely important to me. I think with any historical novel, your research forms a really solid basis for your foundation of your story. I absolutely love that part of the writing process. I spend an awful lot of time. I become a bit of a detective, and I start digging around in archives and lost letters and documents. And obviously with an era like the 1920s, there was lots of photography, there's lots of actually old Pathé newsreels, so you can watch these fabulous sort of flickering images of people rehearsing on stage. And I actually spoke to the archivist at the Savoy Hotel. There is a lady who's worked there for 20 years, Susan Scott. She was fantastically helpful. And I spent an afternoon with her in the hotel talking about the history and who came to the hotel and what it would have been like to walk through the lobby in the era. So a huge, rich amount of stuff in there. And from the theatrical side, I researched at the Victoria and Albert Museum. Actually have a whole archive dedicated to theatre.
Museum, amazing.
Oh, it's amazing. And the stuff they have, I mean, I booked time in the reading room, and you get access to these dusty old scrapbooks of the actresses. I mean, people like Tallulah Bankhead and Gertrude Lawrence, these fabulous, iconic, larger-than-life ladies, and reading their thoughts about their production. And the first night notices and the critics talking about the costumes people wore. So just there's such a rich
huge amount of detail
to draw from as a storyteller. I could be lost in there for weeks, and I think what I have to do is stop researching and start writing, because ultimately it's story, it's character, and your research should just be layered in there quite lightly, I think, for the reader to step into that world with you.
Well, the most interesting thing is when you pick up The Girl from the Savoy, is there's a couple of lists at the back. There's the books that you read, but also the music and that you listen to. Are you still listening to it, or it's made it onto your
Charleston and jazz? It's all going on in the house. Music was a really big thing for me, because one of the characters, Perry, is a musical composer, and music for me, because people were coming out of those awful years of the war, this was really the first time for a long time they'd relaxed and danced and sung and enjoyed themselves. And that's why I wanted to set it around that world of theatre and music. So again, listened to amazing scratchy old gramophone recordings of this early jazz music, and the Savoy Orpheans, who were the resident hotel band at the Savoy, recorded on old HMV vinyls.
Wow.
And you can hear those. I mean, we've such great access now through the internet.
Yeah.
So yeah, my kids are now quite au fait with the whole world of jazz, and to me it really helps me get into the era. You know, I've written in slightly different eras each time, and I think you just have to become a bit of a nerd really and get into that world and inhabit it for
really
a while.
Engage with it.
Plus I love it, you know, so it wasn't a chore at all to listen to that sort of music.
Hazel, when we're talking to authors, we usually ask them for a couple of recommendations for books, but I've got 2 questions for you today.
Okay.
So first one is, because you write period fiction, what is your favourite book that's kind of set in a period setting?
Wow, so many. If you came to my house, you would see my shelves absolutely covered with period pieces. I think there's a book I always go back to. It's a beautiful little book, and I love the title of it. It's the Literary Guernsey and Potato Peel Pie Society, or the Guernsey Literary and Potato Peel Pie Society, Marianne Schaeffer. And it's a beautiful little book set during the Second World War and the German occupation of Guernsey, and it's all written through letters, and I just love the way it's written. It's full of warmth and character and emotion. I mean, you sob. It's just so beautifully written. And there's a lovely story about how it was written. Her niece actually finished it because unfortunately she passed away. Which I just think adds so much emotion to it anyway. And it's one of those books I always press into people's hands. Absolutely beautifully written, and it makes me laugh and cry. And if a book can do that, I think it's done its job.
And what are you reading at the moment?
I'm actually reading Curtis Sittenfeld's Eligible at the moment.
Excellent. It's a new version of Pride and Prejudice.
New version of Pride and Prejudice, and it's totally different. I mean, it's a very modern, and you know, she hasn't made any sort of bones about that at all. It's a very modern retelling. I'm actually really enjoying it. It's taken the Bennet sisters and the relationship between the Mr. and Mrs. Bennet and all of the characters of Darcy and Bingley, but in a very modern setting in Cincinnati in modern day America. So it's great fun. I loved Pride and Prejudice. I loved Longbourn, which was from the servant's point of view, very authentic to the era. Great fun. So I'm really enjoying that at the moment.
And finally, what are you working on next? What's next down the road?
Okay, so I've got 2 really exciting projects on the go at the minute. So my next novel is dual time slip, so it's partly set again in a period setting and partly present day, and it's based on the stories of the Cottingley Fairies.
Oh wow!
Which was 2 little girls in Yorkshire in 1917 said they had taken a photograph of fairies at the bottom of the garden, and it turned into this huge hoax that convinced Arthur Conan Doyle of the authenticity. So I'm hugely excited. I've loved that story for years. So that's my own novel that is yet to be titled. That'll be out sort of summertime 2017.
Very good.
And I'm also co-writing another historical with an author in the US, Heather Webb, who I collaborated with on our anthology Fall of Poppies, which was out earlier this year, which is based around the First World War. It's called Last Christmas in Paris, and it's again written all through letters between a man and a woman, and it spans the 4 years of the Great War and shows how their relationship changes through those 4 years. So we're each taking a character, and it's a fascinating process to co-write in that way, and especially with her being in the States and me being here. So it's very interesting.
It's fantastic.
Great fun, really enjoying it.
So plenty to look out for in the future, but in the meantime, The Girl from the Savoy has just been released, as I say, by HarperCollins. Hazel, thank you so much for coming in to see us.
Thank you.
This is available in all Eason stores and on easons.com, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you very much.